Hey, rookies, and welcome back to the Rookie Farmer Podcast. This is the home of the dreamers, the schemers, and the hustlers here in the world of small scale agriculture. If you're new here, I am your host. My name is Alec Smith, and I am the grower at Crop Culture Farm in New Bern, Georgia. Now, this week's episode is a real treat. I had an awesome opportunity to sit down with my farm mentors, Nicolas and Jeni of Cryistal Organic Farm, just down the road here in New Bern, Georgia. And for those of you guys who don't know, and I would honestly be surprised how you wouldn't know by now, but Cryistal Organic is the farm that really sort of kicked off my whole agricultural journey. I've been working there part-time, full-time, part-time for the last 3 years. And I've learned so much from Nicolas and Jeni. Nicolas has been farming there at Cryistal Organic since '93, the year I was born. So it's not every day that you get the opportunity to learn from someone who's literally been doing this as long as you've been alive. And you guys get to sort of peek behind the curtain and get some of that wisdom and knowledge from both of them as well. And over the last several years, Cryistal Organic has begun to pivot to the world of medicinal herbs. And Jeni and I go into a lot of detail talking about how they transition the farm to the world of medicinal herbs. How do you sell to customers? How do you ship? And what can the world look like if we all had a medicinal herb farmer in our small towns? So whether you're riding on the tractor, you're hoeing a bed, you're getting ready in the morning, or you're on your way to the farmer's market, sit down, buckle up, and let's get ready for this amazing interview with Nicolas and Jeni of Cryistal Organic Farm. All right, we have a very, very special episode today. For those of you guys who've been listening to Farm Startup last year, and now you've been following the Rookie Farmer podcast, you have heard me refer to Cryistal Organic Farm, Nicolas and Jeni, probably about every single episode. And so today I am extremely pleased and delighted to actually have Nicolas and Jeni of Cryistal Organic Farm with me. Thank you guys for jumping on with me.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Um, and before we really get into the meat of it, I just want to say thank you so much for we're coming up on 3 years now. It'll be March of 2022 when I jumped on at the farm. So it's been almost 3 years of a lot of cold days, a lot of hot days, a lot of work. But it's I've learned so much from you guys, and none of the things that I'm doing, none of this that I'm doing right now would be possible without um, the guidance and the wisdom and the opportunity that you guys have given me. So thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you, man. I think you also, have wanted to start your own farm, and we're always looking for a way for it to happen, and you're doing it, and it's really cool to see you starting your own place, even put yourself out there on this podcast, and yeah, extremely proud of what you're doing too. I think that's something cool about the farm is that a lot of people who have come through here have wanted to have their own farms or their own homesteads or work with, vegetables, herbs in some way. And what's really been cool about Nicholas over the years is like he's always more about like collaboration than competition, because
Yeah.
I think there's this idea that like, oh, well, if they start a farm, then they're taking my customer or something. And that's never been the case where like Nicholas has always encouraged people who work here, yes, learn what you can and go on your own and, do it yourself because we need more small farms and we need more people doing what we're doing here. So there's always this element of like that he encourages that and is excited for the people that have come through like you that are now doing it. It like makes him, I mean, I'm speaking for you, but like
Yeah.
excited and proud and happy. And there's never this sense of like competition. It's more like, yes, let's do more of this. And so if he can teach more people to do it as he gets older and one day wants to retire, then like that's great because you're leaving this behind to the younger farmers that are still, that are going to be the future of it. So yeah. I mean, I think you also realize that, um it's one thing talking about it and it's the other thing doing it. And
Oh yeah.
you talk about it and you're doing it. So you're doing really great.
Yeah. And I talked about it for a long time before I ever did it, and realized that you can watch YouTube videos, read books. You can even engage with other people who are kind of in the space or whatever, talking to farmers head off at a farmer's market. Or and you can think that you have an understanding, like, yeah, I think I can understand how to farm, but then when it really comes down to it, like until you're there, crawling a bed, pulling weeds, or learning like just the little nuances of like how to bunch a bunch of Hackerite turnips, like those are the things that are different from just the conceptual idea that you read in a book versus like actually being on the ground making it happen. Yeah, and that's why I've said it since the beginning of everything that we've done. It's the importance of like going and working on a farm. Don't just start something without any sort of real tangible experience. Yeah, because there's just certain invaluable things that you can learn from like doing it day in and day out, getting that repetition, and then being able to ask stupid questions as a young farmer to someone who's been doing this a lot longer and be able to have like a lot of wisdom and learn from all of the years of experience that you have. But before we dive too much into all that, let's give everybody a bit of an intro to who you guys are and what is Cryistal Organic Farm.
All right. Well, I'm obviously Nicolas. This is Jeni, and we are Cryistal Organic Farm. The name comes from the reason the name comes from the fact that we have a little part of our land where you can actually pick quartz crystals. Hey, hold on. I think we got one we can show. And so this is where the name comes from.
My name is not Cryistal.
That's right. So this is a really good example. But we found this laying on the ground on a really small section of our farm. So hence the name Cryistal Organic Farm. It's been around for over 30 years. So I started the farm in 1990, 93, 94, around that time. Really, really small. A little bit like what you're doing, Alec. Maybe even kind of smaller with less infrastructure. You have to understand that the concept of having a small farm back then was really non-existent. People had gardens, but kind of like this whole small vegetable market farmer, gardener, grower. Because we actually, I think you and I had talked about it. Are we growers? Are we farmers? Are we gardeners?
Yeah,
It was you and I, right?
yeah,
But no, I think I considered myself a farmer. I guess steward to the land. But so started really small, and in 30 years, we grew to what we are now. We've been basically this size, the semi-high tunnels, this space for the last decade or so. And we got plenty of room to grow. But, I always say, it's one thing buying the seed; it's another thing actually getting a crop, a basket or crop out of it. There's just so many things to do to make it successful that you got to minimize those failures every year. If you have a lot of crops that fail for whatever reason, you can't minimize that. You got to really scale back and see what is going on. But so we've been certified organic since 1993, and we grow organic vegetables, fruits, flowers. And in the last 7 years, we had added medicinal herbs to that, and that's where Jeni started, and so that's been a great opportunity for us to kind of diversify our crops a little bit over the years. When I first started in 1993, I mean, there was no one growing heirloom tomatoes. There was no one growing a plain old salad radish. But now, over 30 years, there's a lot more young farmers. And so there's a lot more competition. I think I was telling you yesterday that if I were to go back to a farmer's market, we'd have to go to 2, maybe even 3, thinking about it, to make the same amount of money with it in one market 15 years ago. And the reason is that there's more markets, there's more farmers, and the population of Americans that actually go to farmers markets is growing, but it's not growing to the point where every market is just going to be just gangbusters. So it's so that's yeah, and so it's nice to diversify and see what else you can do out there to make your life a little easier. And so that's what we're attempting to do. It's not been easy to go from a retail based farm to a wholesale based farm, but I think we're doing okay. There's a lot of outside factors that make it a little bit more difficult. But having the medicinal herbs has definitely been a very eye-opening experience, the demand for it.
Going to share like a little bit of my history too, like how I kind of came to this. My background was in sales and marketing. I went to school for fashion merchandising and worked in that for many, many years through my 20s and 30s. or early 30s. And then in 2014, I left a pretty big sales job and decided I wanted to learn to farm. And I wanted to go back to the land, and I wanted to find the healing that I felt like the land and the soil had to offer me. And so I was getting a farm box from Cryistal Organic Farm. Didn't really know Nicolas. I knew his mother. And I texted him and said, "Hey, do you want some part-time help on your farm?" And so he said, "Yeah, can you start Monday?" This was like a Saturday. And so I came and began to work part-time here. Started to learn about farming and growing. At the same time, I was studying homeopathy. I later studied herbalism formally. And so it sort of just flowed that a few years into farming, I said, well, why don't we try to grow some of these medicinal herbs here on the farm? And his mother, so a little bit of their backstory that he didn't share was that they moved here from Belgium in the early or the late 70s. His mom bought this land. They built a house here with her second husband. Nicolas came here when he was like 15 years old and grew up on this land. And so his mom, they actually got their visa on growing medicinal herbs here on this land.
Oh,
But
wow.
they
I didn't
never,
know that. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So, but they never really did it. So she had a few things like some nettles that the nettles that are here came from seeds she brought from Austria. So they had a few things, but really hadn't done it on a scale of, anything to sell, just a little bit for personal use. So then it made sense that a lot of those were already here. And
hmm
also that I was studying herbalism and all these things. And so I was like, well, let's try it. And I remember this light bulb moment when we were sitting at a conference, an herbal conference in Florida in 2018, and we were sitting in a class, and he was talking about how like 85% of the medicinal herbs are imported into this country from the big bulk herb suppliers. They're coming from other countries, and they started naming these herbs, and it's like milky oats, and it's red clover, and it's nettles, and it's all these things that like we're going, wait, like some of these are cover crops that we grow, and some of these are, they just grow here so easy. And that was kind of like a light bulb moment of walking away from that and going, oh, this is something that we can do here. Let's try it. And so that's kind of how the medicinal herb aspect of the farm started and came to fruition. And Nicolas, he had started Morningside Farmers Market in 95. And he had gone to markets in Atlanta with the farm, like veggies and everything, to Morningside Market for 25 years. And then in 2020, when the world shut down, we took that opportunity to leave the farmers market after 25 years. And so when he mentioned kind of switching to a wholesale farm, we in 2020 we changed the dynamic of like how we sold our food. And so we left the farmers market. We started an online farm store on the farm, where customers could shop directly from the farm. And we started working with wholesalers like Fresh Harvest. And so we went from a like 70% what sold retail, 30% sold wholesale.
Mhm.
And that almost reversed, I would say, to where we're like a 70-80% wholesale farm now, 20-25% retail farm now. And so when he was saying like the business model switch, that did happen in 2020. And he had gone to markets for 25 years. And you can speak to this a little bit, like that's exhausting,
Yeah, that's a lot of early Saturday mornings.
And he was always there. And something he talked about a lot was like, it was important that he was there, that the farmer was there. And I think he's told you that he wasn't sending other people, like it was him and they knew him, and he watched people, their kids grow up and their kids shop at the market. Over 25 years is a long time, but it was also exhausting. And I think it's been a really positive change for us. And switching to that model, also the medicinal herbs have allowed us to do that as well. And I know we'll get more into that, but just, yeah, for the history of it.
Committing to Saturdays, essentially, the majority of the year for 25 years, like that's an insane, I'm a year and some change into doing that, and and I get a Saturday off, and it's like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Like this is such an amazing break. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of the give and take. It's like, do you go to the place where people are? Like, do you go to where your customers are, where that you can, you can confidently sell, the things that you're growing, but knowing that it's a lot of additional work. Like so many times I even fail to consider the 6 to 8 hours a day that you work on a Saturday as like working, I'm like, oh, well, I'm only working at the farm 2 days a week right now. And you're thinking like, well, yeah, you're on the ground, like working in the soil, planting, harvesting, cultivating, whatever, 2 days a week. But you have a whole day on Saturday and all that sort of stuff. And so it's yeah, farmers markets are they're
It's nice
they're
to
a lot
count
of
the
work.
money after, so it's nice to count all that money that you make.
Oh yeah,
The support, it's a, like you say, give and take. It's the relationships you make, the friendships you build. But yeah, it takes its toll. But
Mhm.
I think it's very important if you're going to have a small farm like ours. Um, I think farmers market is definitely the way to start.
For sure. Get yourself out there, build relation with customers, see what people like, connect with restaurants through that. Yeah, absolutely. Before we sort of dive into the stuff on the medicinal herbs, Nicholas, can you kind of give us an idea of how organic production, like organic vegetable production, has changed over the last 32 years? Even maybe even just specifically at Cryistal Organic, but I imagine that you've seen a lot of changes happen, whether it's like soil amendments or sales outlets or so on and so forth over this 3 decades.
Well, the so when I started in 1990, there was no internet. So I mean, just imagine a world without internet. It's hard to do, but all you had were books, and there weren't many books. And the main one for a lot of us that started around that time was Elliot Coleman's book, the Four Seasons, I think it's called. And
Organic.
yeah, the New Organic Grower. That's it. And so I basically took that information and applied it to this climate here, and obviously things are different, and the soil's different. But that was basically the knowledge that I had. There were many people doing it, so it's not like you couldn't really go get an internship or go volunteer on a farm because they weren't around.
Yeah, especially down here in Georgia.
Hmm. Right. And so just imagine the difference of how it is now. And obviously that took 30 years to build. But the biggest change is more in I can see the interest from the universities, and they want to study, and they really want to do research on the different products. I feel like that's been going on for a good while, but just the because of that research, the amount of different products that are available now. I mean, when I first started, it was chicken manure. That's basically what we've been able to find.
Yeah.
And now we find these fertilizer blends that are, pretty good, delivered. I mean, they're it's all right there.
Yeah, there was no Seven Springs Farm Supply when you
It was
started.
not. Although they started around 30 years ago as well. So they
Yeah,
started at the same time, but that's all pre-internet days. And
yeah,
only that really come about with the internet. Well, no, I think they had a catalog and stuff. What they offered was totally different than what they offer now.
yeah,
I mean, you have your herbicides that are, that are armory approved. I've never used any herbicide, but the weeds are really killing us sometimes. And so, we bought a product. We're going to give it a try and see if we can somehow or another, it's armory approved. If we can somehow or another take that off our plate, because the weeds over the 30 years, the weeds have also increased. We have a lot of noxious weeds that we don't have now. One being the dog fennel.
uh-huh.
Uh, That was not around 30 years ago. The false dandelion, I don't remember having all them around. So the thistles, they've been around, but we just have so many just new weeds. Grasshoppers weren't as bad. The fire ants weren't as bad. All that was kind of increased in intensity. Um, I think there's two reasons. One reason is that I've been growing here, so you're promoting the habitat for these insects. Also, the weeds not so much, but the insects at least. And obviously, the climate's changed over the years. It's
Yeah, can you touch on that? Can you just talk about how you've seen sort of like weather patterns and climate change shifts happen on your time
I
on the
guess,
farm?
yeah. I remember cold days all the way back for 30. In 30 years, every so often we would have the weather going to teens. So that's not so abnormal. I think the biggest is the frequency of it all. Sometimes, like this year, the longevity of the cold
Mhm.
seems to be more. Usually, I remember a max of 3 days, and but now I feel like we've had this winter at least these couple stretches. Now I don't know Is it climate change? I mean, it's a possibility. We definitely need to do something, but it's also weather. It's just sometimes that's how it happens. But we definitely need to be very aware of the changes and do what we all can to do our parts, because I don't feel like it's getting any better. I think it's only kind of like,
Would you say like the summer you talked about it getting more tropical, like
yeah, more
more
tropical.
subtropical, or like
Mm. Yeah, there's last couple of falls when it's been so hot and dry. I don't really
Mhm.
remember having that. The last few years, what I have noticed is that been more crops that have not done well than I'm used to. And there again, climate could definitely have something to do with it. Farmer does. I mean, it's always the soil.
Mhm.
That comes to the farmer, but sometimes it just. I mean, you remember when we had all these squash bugs like we had this summer that
Yeah.
just devastated all winter squash. That has never happened.
Yeah.
So that was just intense.
Well, and the USDA like officially changed all the hardiness zones. They kind of bumped everybody up a little bit or down, however you think about it. And so there is obviously some sort of a shift happening where kind of the growing conditions, the kind of the climate conditions are changing. We are like steadily inching closer and closer to like a subtropical. I mean, yeah, we're growing like awesome citrus in South Georgia now, and stuff like that. And so we'll be doing that stuff out here sooner before you know it.
We're talking about maybe growing some lemon trees under high tunnel, because the tree that we had in pots and so well. But just to finish the question about the change, I mean, I feel like everybody that gets into this now, that is like in the 20s and 30s, there's just so much knowledge now, and
Mhm.
people's the capability of finding the knowledge. You don't even have to learn it. It's all available. I mean, pretty soon we're going to have a PhD. I mean, we already do. We're going to have a PhD professor on our phone, because everything we need to know we can ask. I think that's changing the ball game even more, and I feel like of how data everything will be driven, and just so much information. I think people need to realize that, for me anyway, intuition is what. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't rely on just a computer. You gotta think. You gotta have intuition. You gotta feel it, because at the end of the day, that's how I have done.
And
And
that's one thing that I've really valued about my time working for you guys has been, there's yes, there are things, whether it's like soil tests and, crop planning, those sort of thing that, maybe there's some more kind of mathematical precision. It's kind of fleshed out in a really logical way. But so much of it, yeah, is just this intuition, kind of being better connected with the soil, like understanding, like, all right, like what are these plants needing right now? Like, so, just ebbing and flowing and sort of becoming a part of that system. Even just saying things like, oh, like, well, we transplanted all those beets in the wrong bed. And you're like, well, it must have needed to happen that way. And um, and yeah, and like blessing the plants as you put them in the ground, and speaking life and encouraging them to grow. Like those are things that, yeah, those don't get talked about in the books. Those don't get talked about in the master classes. Those are just things that you have to, yeah, you kind of, I mean, we're talking about them right now. So hopefully people can sort of begin to pick up on those things, but really yeah, those are just things that you acquire over time, and beginning to realize like, oh no, like my presence, my energy, my footsteps here, like they make a difference. Like I think that's an old saying I've heard, that the best fertilizer is a farmer's footprints. And it's just being there, being connected with what you're growing, and realizing like, yeah, this is not a science. I mean, there are scientific aspects, but I mean, this is nature. This is life. This is a life force that we're participating in, and we're sort of just becoming the conductor of those of this symphony. And yeah, and so once again, thank you so much for being able to sort of help me understand those things, because some of us have a tendency to want to be very analytical and just like, all right, give me my formulas, stick it in the ground, produce it. But that's the difference between small scale, like more regenerative, real organic, and the way that we grow versus, a large organic farm that's just, yeah, following, what's your soil test? Let's get the right balance and then produce something and ship it out and do it all over again. it just kind of loses the life. It loses the magic of it all. Let's transition to talking about the herbs a little bit. I know you said about 7 years ago you sort of made that transition to or from just selling kind of mixed vegetable and some fruit to transitioning toward those. What were some of those first herbs that you guys began to grow for sale?
I would say like the first, so we were still going to market then. And so like our whole thing was, well, if we're going to grow these things, we got to educate our customers of what they
Mhm.
are. So we started with stuff that we felt like that was really easy to for customers to kind of like ease into. So a lot of your mint family herbs are a good starting place. So like peppermint, spearmint, we did like tulsi, lemon balm, catnip. Some of those were like the first ones. And then you don't want to really discount your culinary herbs because they're also very medicinal in the sense like food is medicine. And you've got like oregano is a fantastic medicinal herb. So we were doing more of that, like the oregano, rosemary, thyme, sweet marjoram, sage, garden sage is a fantastic herb for respiratory, like throat things. And so a lot of those herbs too that we started with hibiscus, lemongrass, a lot of those are like food, like almost like your food herbs, but very like family kid friendly herbs. So it was something that was really easy to take to the market and just say, like, I would make little signs and say, take a picture of this with your phone of a recipe of how you make hibiscus tea, how you, cook your nettle soup or different things like that. And so I think that was the key. We started out with things that were easy to explain how to use.
And how did the customers respond to sort of this kind of new offering at the market and kind of the educating process?
They were really excited, I would say, like, for the most part, like, people were really like, "Oh, what's this? Tell me about this." And in those little, like, signs that I would make or I would be there to talk about, like, "This is what it's good for, and this is you can use this if you're, sick with this or to prevent this," or just as, like, a nutritive, herbal tea or whatever, and so I feel like the response was overall really, really positive. And I would say around that time, we kinda had, like, our Instagram going, and a really well-known herbalist now, she saw like, I was putting pictures of some of the herbs I was growing, and it was really, like, a few plants, like, it wasn't a lot, it was just me, like, experimenting, and I would just be like, "I'm gonna try these," and the next one, like, "I'm gonna try some more," and she saw that I was sharing that, and she had a small herbal, like, Etsy shop at the time, and she said, "Hey, will you grow can I buy some of these from you?" And that's sort of, like, how that started, so, I mean,
Mm.
I have a love-hate relationship with social media and Instagram and all of these things, but that is how that relationship formed, and now, her business has taken off, it's incredible, she has over 100,000, like, followers on Instagram, like, her business has blown up, and in a sense, we have grown with her. I'd
Mhm.
say, like, 85% of the herbs we grow go to her, we sent her 600 pounds of medicinal herbs this year,
Wow.
um, and so, like, that was one of those, like, really serendipitous moments of, like, when that happened, and then after that, it followed where more people were interested, we were like, "We're onto something, like, we're doing the right like, we're in this, like, the right place at the right time."
Well, COVID helped because people
So, yeah, we started growing in 2018, and then in 2020 so over those 2 years, we were trying and experimenting, we were selling a little bit, I'd have a little and the internet was a huge part of that, like, you talked about starting not having the internet, but the internet, social media, like, all of that was the reason why our herbs got so like, it was well known really fast, I think. And then, yeah, by 2020, we were growing more, and there were a lot of people who were opting out of the medical system during that time, and they were looking for alternatives, and they were looking for support for themselves and their families, and they were looking for, what can we do differently here to support us during this time? And it was the herbs, and it was um, a lot of things like that that we were growing, and so they were excited to find us, and there was a huge demand that really spiked during that time too. And I like Nicholas you'll say or I'll say, like, you were kind of on the forefront of organic growing and being certified organic very early on, with the farm. Like, you were doing something new before people were doing it. And I feel like even with the herbs, we kinda got into that market early on before a lot of people were doing it. And now it's really cool, 7 years later to hear people saying, like, I just read a article, I think it was Real Organic Project or somebody recently, and they were talking about, like, diversify your farm with medicinal herbs, like, to
Mm.
people work into small farms, so it's being talked about more. I think it's awesome, like, I think there should be more herb growers, and there should be, like you'll never have enough people growing medicinal herbs, I feel.
Well, and I think that, oh, go ahead.
I just want to say one thing. It's growing medicinal herbs and vegetables. It's quite different, and so one should definitely, get to know the herbs because they take longer. Um, so you have to be. We started really small, like everything else. I'm always in baby steps. But it's taken us 7 years to get to 600 pounds. Of just one, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a lot on this.
Oh yeah, that's a lot.
It's not a lot of like radishes, I guess, but it's a lot of.
That's a lot of trips to the UPS store to drop off boxes.
It's a lot. It's a lot of shipping. It's a lot of the UPS customers or the workers looking at you funny because your boxes smell like fragrant herbs.
Yeah. What are you shipping here?
When you go to a farmer's market now, a lot of times you'll see an herbalist selling their tinctures, and those they can grow them themselves. Obviously, some do, but a lot of those small scale herbalists will grow fast enough where they need more. And so, find your little niche somewhere. Don't. It may still be easier to sell a radish than a lot of. Mint is one thing, but like a lot of ashwagandha. It may still be easier. So, so just keep that in mind. I think diversifying the medicinal herbs is very important, but it also happened because of relationship we built with this herbalist, and then the other ones followed. But she's the main one, and so build a relationship, and then you can grow with them, and that's how I grew the farm, how we grew the market. How we've grown the medicinal part of it. It's just being small.
What that relationship building, and the other thing, I know we veered off your question a little bit, but like something Nicolas always says is like, I only bring the best thing to market.
Absolutely.
I only sell the top quality products. Like, I've taken that, applied it to the herbs. I will not let something go out that I feel like is not,
clean enough,
like not clean enough, not, like just the highest of the highest quality. And that's something you always really push, because we've seen that not be the case, with farms. And so like that makes people, and granted, like it's not going to be perfect, like a grocery store vegetable, like they're going to look different or whatever. Like they're going to have some lumps and bumps and different colors, but like the quality is the highest that you can produce and send out. That's super, super important. And then people know that. And I think one of the reasons we were able to leave the market is because we did have that recognition and name recognition and reputation over 25 years. And the same reason why the herbs have been successful is because I built on something that he had already created. And so there was already this standard of, it being top quality, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Nicolas, you already touched on this, but can you go a little deeper into sort of the like production differences in growing the medicinal herbs and flowers versus growing vegetables?
Okay. I guess I'll just pick a couple herbs that we found that have grown highly, and but she can help me with that. But just for example, this year we had a lot of ashwagandha and Alec and echinacea. All those crops we just finished harvesting 2 weeks ago, and they've been in the ground since spring. I think we can improve a lot of how it was grown, but just the fact that it took that long is one thing. If you have the space, great. But if you market demands more broccoli because you're there every weekend, you may want to grow broccoli rather than this amount of ashwagandha. That's just one thing, just the duration of it.
Well, to lay off that a little bit, like these root crops, like your echinacea, ashwagandha, elephant, they're in the ground for like 9. Like we're going to start seeding those now. Like we're the 1st of February. We're about to start seeding those, and we just finished digging a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
we've gone a little bit late because of like the weather and some of the stuff. But at the minimum, 9 months they're in the ground. So you're looking at like at the same time as like a ginger turmeric crop, almost maybe a little longer. So you do have to have the space. You do have to charge a premium price for it, like market price, because of how long it's there. And some of your mint family herbs are obviously like a cut and harvest and reharvest. But those are a little different, like your perennials like that. But with some of these root crops and things, you do have to consider how long they're going to be there, and the seeding takes longer. for the germination rate is a lot slower on medicinal herbs. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at something for weeks and like, where are you? Where are you? And then remind myself, I had an herbal teacher that was like, chamomile is not kale. Like, it's not going to pop up. Like, your herbs are not going to pop up like a kale or a broccoli or a lettuce or something. Like, it's going to take longer. So they're a little trickier to seed. So some of that's different. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the main, and then also just because it's fresh on our minds, but we grow a lot of hibiscus. Hibiscus get very big. So getting rid of the hibiscus so you wouldn't plant something else. We've pulled them in the past. This year we mowed them down and we kind of working in the soil, but then you're left with these big clumps, these big roots. So that you have to then rake out. And so, it's different than a crop of, tomatoes or peppers. It's a plant that you can easily manage. Hibiscus is big. It's hard to get out. That's the difference.
What's sort of the ratio of like perennial to annual plants on the medicinal side?
It's more annual.
60 annual, 40% perennial. And has that, and shifting to adding more perennial things, has that changed sort of, obviously you have to dedicate space. It's going to be there long term versus, being able to be like, well, this bed, we're having some soil issues. Maybe we just need to pull this out, retill it, do another rotation of something else. How has moving to having more perennial plants, how has that changed sort of like the production mindset or flow of everything?
I feel like a lot of the perennial, a lot of them went into spaces on the farm that they were kind of dormant, like that we weren't using. So some of these perennial beds we started did not have annual crops in them. So like the original garden and some of those. So getting some of those back into production. So we weren't really taking up space. We don't grow any herbs in the high tunnels. So like he didn't mention, we have 28 high tunnels for people that don't know here. So that's like the prime real estate, as Nicolas says. So all the herbs, they don't need to be in high tunnel. Like, they could be outside. They're already like, they're good. They're not as sensitive as your like tomatoes, peppers, things like that. And so we reserve that space for the vegetable production still, other than calendula we do grow in high tunnels. So I think that's but
well, and also you have to some herbs do better in partial shade. So like some of the perennial stuff is kind of shady, where it's not as good for vegetable production, where you need more sun. So you can kind of play with your farm's outlay and then decide. We grow a lot of mint, and these are obviously perennials that never stop. So how the farm made the perennial beds that will look this year, and you come back in 5 years, they're going to look totally different. It's just an evolution. We have crabgrass. We have, it's a battle. It's a battle.
I think something too about the medicinal says that we have 175 acres, but we've got 8 acres inside deer fencing. And then on the back part of the property where we grow, we've got like movable electric deer fencing. The 8 acres has permanent deer fencing. And so the deer don't eat a lot of medicinal herbs. So it is something that you can do outside the deer fencing and kind of leave it. So that's something that we're looking to as we expand more, is to go out, where the deer pressure will be an issue, because a lot of those medicinals they won't touch.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of the different herbs that you guys are growing, a handful of them are like native plants to, whether if not at least North America specifically, they grow really well in the Southeast. And so, and we don't have a lot of like big open, full sun, well-tilled soil. It's a lot of kind of scrubby forest edge land. And so if you're growing things that are well adapted to that, you can, I don't want to call it marginal land, but like you said, Nicolas, areas that maybe are not suitable for like annual vegetable production could potentially be a great way to incorporate, native perennials or native medicinal herbs kind of into the areas along the edge.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how it started. Just kind of design your farm according to what you have.
Jeni, Can you touch briefly on you talked about herb, but on the seed starting side of things with herbs? Because I just started some herbs this past week, and and I was reminded of how much different it is. Like starting, I can't think of everything that I sowed. Just in the size of the seed, the light requirements, all of the different aspects of starting kind of medicinal herbs versus like an annual vegetable, like you said, like a kale.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of like trial and error over the years for that. So a few things that I've learned. So bottom heat is super important with your medicinal herbs. So heat mats, however you want to have that bottom heat that's consistent for them. Um, and sometimes they like the domes over the top of your trays too to keep that humidity in and the warmth, like especially if you're starting like this time of year where it's so cold. And then really good your soil. We use dirt craft organic soil for our potting mix. And then the way that I sow my medicinal seeds is really on top of the soil. So I don't cover them with any soil. Um, these really teeny tiny ones. I mean, maybe like your calendula seeds are bigger, hibiscus is bigger. Like I'm going to cover those like a squash seed or something. But all these medicinals that are teeny tiny, like I am making my tray, I'm pressing it down. We use the wind strip tray, so I'm like going to fill a wind strip tray. I'm going to take an empty tray and press that soil down. I'm going to fill it to the top again, so it's really compact. And then I'm going to sprinkle the seeds in the cells. And then I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to press the seeds into the soil. And that's what I'm going to do just on top. And then you're going to lightly mist until they come up. Now that's been the way, like that is working really well for us. With your medicinal seeds, the packet will tell you sometimes they need stratification. So they're going to need to have like some cold stratifying before they're sown in the warm soil. So some people do that like in a moist paper towel in the fridge for 15, 30 days, whatever it says. Some of your medicinal seeds need to be like scarified where they need to be nicked or rubbed on like sandpaper. I will tell you that we don't stratify any of our seeds because our seed house where we seed our seeds, the temperature fluctuation, it's not climate controlled. So I've got heat mats. It doesn't have heating or cooling in there other than fans. So it's warm during the day, it's cold at night. So what I've found is that my seeds are naturally stratifying in there. And that was like Nicolas's idea. It's like, don't stratify these, just put them in the soil right away because they are getting cold at night. So they're essentially getting like what would happen in nature because it's not climate controlled in there to that degree. And I've had really, really good success the past couple of years implementing those things.
Especially for something like a chamomile or maybe like a California poppy where like you're starting them. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like some of those you're starting in the fall to then be overwintered in the seed house, so then get transplanted out. Like they just take that long that, yeah, you're really getting some, especially for us the last couple of weeks, like getting some really cold temperatures that would be well below what you would be getting in a refrigerator.
Right. And I think I've seen if they like that. I haven't seen that fail for us. Now, if you've got a seed house that you're starting with seeds and it's very climate controlled and it doesn't fluctuate much, then yeah, you're going to need to probably stratify in the fridge or do something else. But yeah, like our chamomile, we start in like October. Ideally, it's planted out in January. We have not put our chamomile outside yet. I feel like we're behind this year, but we've had these two like snowstorms, so it's ended up again that intuitive kind of blessing because they may not have made it through all these deep freezes. We had like 10 days of freezing, which chamomile is really hardy, but so it's about to go outside. The California poppy we seed early. Calendula we're seeding in the fall. We're growing that all winter in our high tunnels. So yeah, and something else with the medicinals too, the seeds are so tiny, so it's pretty impossible to drop one seed per cell. So you're going to end up with multiples. So if I start them in a 128 or 164, I'm going to bump those up to like 72s and let them get nice and big. I'm going to divide them, put them in 72s, and then let them get nice before they go outside. And that's been another thing is to bump them up, get them nice and big before they go outside. And that helped us a lot last year.
And as you can see, it's a lot more work than the kale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't have that like annual vigor of that big seed that just wants to shoot up and take off.
And that's where that's where your pricing on your herbs like has to reflect that. And I think where people are like we don't wholesale our herbs, there's one price. And so And we don't do that for a reason, because of like everything that goes into it, from the seed to the harvest and all the time it's in the ground. You really have to think about all that. And I do a lot of research for pricing and look at what other herb farms are charging. And I think that's really important to stay at the same market price. So
And although I would say probably traditionally folks would grow a lot of herbs that they could use as medicine, but I mean, maybe over the last 100 years or so, it's probably fallen out of fashion for the majority of people in kind of in the modern West. And so, but gardening has sort of persisted. So I feel like there's a little bit more common understanding on how to grow vegetables and things. But with a lot of these medicinal herbs, there's so much like knowledge and experience that people have to acquire through this whole process. But what sort of like experiences or qualifications should someone have? Do they need to have any of them in order to like effectively grow and sell these different herbs?
like so there's the Medicinal Herb Grower. That's a book. It's really, really helpful. It was written some years ago by the folks that have Zach Wood's Herb Farm. That's a big one. And then they talk about from seed to harvest. They even kind of price in there, although those
Mhm.
prices are not, I don't think they're relevant anymore because it is many years old. So I learned a lot from that. There's a book called Growing the Future. It's about growing medicinals and endangered herbs. So that's a really good one. And then I did the Chestnut School of Herbal Medicine. Now I did their herbal immersion program. It's like 2 years, 2.5 years long. But the reason I chose that online program was because there was a huge focus on growing the medicinal herbs. And so like I was already growing at the time, but I still learned things from that program.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of classes like that out there. Um, I have a class, so it's on our website
Yeah.
if you want to take it. Yeah, it's and I actually did it with Ariel, the herbalist that we started growing for that I mentioned earlier. So it's her and I, and it's a really great class because I'm talking about like really the technical from seed to harvest. And then she is talking about like, the medicinal aspects of, we go into I think like 35 different herbs, and there's a chart that comes with it of like how to grow into seed, um, the medicinal uses, if you want to make a tea or a tincture. So that chart is something I wish I had had when I started, because it really talks about how it seeds best, so from seed or from cutting or from root divisions. And I think that's just some of the things you learn along the way. And now, like Nicolas said, there's so many classes online. I mean, even on like social media, you can learn a lot just from watching. I still learn from other growers that I follow. Like, oh, you did this instead, or just sort of trying to, um, make things more efficient. Like with our root harvest, we have like a root chopper now that chops all the roots before we dry, things like that. So
And do you need to have any sort of like certifications or things behind you to be able to do this? Because I don't know, to me it feels like this is obviously we treat food as medicine, and we understand that the food that we're producing has the power to heal people as well. But when you're growing these very strong, powerful medicinal herbs, I mean, it essentially is medicine. And I to me, I would almost feel wary if I'm like, if as a grower, if I'm selling some herbs and I'm just spouting off like, oh, this is good for this is good for that. This one will help with your lungs or whatever. And I'm just sort of giving information that I've regurgitated from a book that I've read without any sort of like actual way of confirming that sort of thing. I would almost feel like having some sort of a certification would just kind of give you some more legitimacy when you're helping people on this journey of like coming to wholeness and coming to health.
so I disagree there. Like
Okay.
um I feel like this is knowledge and wisdom that's in all of us. And I
Gotcha.
feel that in the Appalachian Mountains, especially in this region, people had their food garden and they had their herb garden,
Hmm.
their
Medicine garden.
medicine garden, they called it. So this is old wisdom. This is in all of us. And I feel like if we start talking about certifications and things, then some people get to profit off of that whole
Hmm.
wisdom that I feel should be available to everybody. What I do think though is that it's really important not to make any claims. So I don't say like oh, use this root, it cures this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just be very careful about our wording, about our like any claims that we're making. We don't do that. What I do is I say, I'm selling fresh calendula flowers. Here's their scientific name. And then, the flowers are edible. And then you, in your own sovereignty and wisdom, you get these and you learn yourself what you do with them.
Mm.
And you learn how to best support your family and yourself and your community. And that's really for you. I don't feel like as the grower, it's my job to tell you how to work with the medicinals. Like I can tell you what they are, and I
Mhm.
can say like, oh, well, um, chamomile, could possibly help you sleep, or it's a really great digestive bitters or something like that. Um, but it's really on that person to understand and learn, and however they want to do that. Do they want to take a class? Do they want to learn from a mentor? Do they want an apprenticeship somewhere? And so in that sense that they can, really take it upon themselves. And then that gives you more power in yourself to do it. And that is medicine in itself, I feel. And so, yeah. But I believe that more and more people are going to move the way towards medicinal plants. Like it is the original way. I believe
Mhm.
these plants grow for us. And I feel like what you mentioned, like a lot of these that grow here already that are native plants, they're here for us already. And
Exactly.
so, we just have to learn about them and sit with them and read and yeah. So
So in a similar way, where a farmer can be posted up at a farmer's market and selling something and could really say whatever they want to say about the quality or the practices or whatever. It requires a level of relationship and trust and like you said, sovereignty or autonomy to where we're taking this and you know we're moving away from this sort of codependency on industry and systems and mechanisms that just sort of say like take this and it'll fix your problems. If it's more of like coming into a a union, a dance of with the food, with the medicine, and sort of tailoring it to what we need and kind of
I right.
I just want to say this real quick. Slow food is a big movement, right? Slow food. Now you have slow clothes, where the clothes you wear are their made.
mm,
This is what she's talking about is slow medicine. I mean,
mm,
I can give you I can give you any kind of herb. It's not going to do anything in that form. You have to slowly produce the medicine. It's not, we're not selling a tincture. We're not selling drops. We're selling the fresh herb or the dried herb, which requires somebody to take and make medicine out of it.
Mhm.
And that's where we can support them. We're not claiming, hey, you're going to be cured from whatever. We take them, and she has a lot of knowledge about it. And so that's, yeah. I just want to add that it's like it's
Yeah.
slow.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a whole process. And to speak to what you're saying, it's so true because like we are in a culture where we want the quick fix.
mhm,
We want give me the pill, give me and a lot of even like homeopathy and herbalism and different things have kind of gone that route a little bit where they're like, well, don't give me the pharmaceutical, but give me the herb that's gonna fix me. Give me the homeopathic remedy that's gonna fix me right now. And so we've spent a lot of time, myself included over the years, outsourcing our healing to other people. And I feel like with the herbs, when you learn, I mean, even if you didn't grow the herb, but you like buy calendula flowers from me, then all of a sudden, like you get to do this yourself. And there
mhm,
is so much, and I know I said it before, there's so much like power and medicine, like spiritual medicine in that you get to do it yourself. And to touch back on what you were saying about the certification, I also hear you because there are herbs that you can grow that are potentially poisonous. We don't grow any of those herbs. So one of the things that like when I started, I was like, I'm just gonna grow food herbs, like as they're called. So that's like your mint family herbs and things that are herbs that are not potentially poisonous. I don't work with herbs that are potentially poisonous. Really at all. I mean, there are cases where it can be really helpful in low doses. And a lot of the herbs that I grow, we were talking more like adaptogens and things like that. So I'm not growing a lot of these herbs that could potentially have um, negative consequences or side effects should somebody not know how to prepare them properly. So I feel like in that sense too, like we grow about 45 varieties, and what we're choosing are the ones that we love to grow, that we love as medicine. And that's sort of where we've, gone with some of that. Yeah. But I hear what you're saying about that, because um it could be, like you have to do your own learning and your own research,
Mhm.
because you can't just listen to somebody else, because it could be a potentially, not safe situation if you just blindly followed. Mhm.
Now, my hope with this episode is that people are going to hear it who are either currently, maybe they're in vegetable production, or kind of, the focus of the podcast is new farmers or aspiring farmers, and people will hear this, and maybe the idea of going down the medicinal herb or the culinary herb or the flower route is just as appealing as going into kind of mixed vegetable production, like the majority of us do. Um, but my big question is like, is this a possible way of like making a living? Like, if you decided we want to start a farm and we'd want to just grow herbs, if you're selling at a farmer's market, or whatever, let's just say, farmer's market, kind of you're living in a suburban or semi rural, or maybe you are urban, basically any other context where vegetables would be the same, but we're just removing vegetables and transplanting in um medicinal herbs. Are we at a point sort of with this movement, or to where people could actually begin to do this and say, like, I'm a medicinal herb farmer, and like this is my living that I make?
Yeah, I mean, I
there's
think so.
variables.
Yeah, I think that like um to do that, from what I've seen, is that you would need to have a handful of customers that you like contract grow for,
Mm.
where they're like, okay, this is what I need for the year. So you've got your plan, you've got your crops, that this is how much revenue you're going to make. Do I think that you could make a living just growing herbs going to the farmer's market? In my opinion, no. And because that's such a small market, but when you can reach the whole country, you can ship your
Mhm.
herbs, you can, like we do, things like that. And you work with a few of these big, whether they're herbalists or tea companies or skincare makers, or, anything like that, that you kind of have this pre-order for the year. Um, that's where I think maybe you could do it, because you would see what that revenue looks like. But I also think, like, to grow on that scale, now there's a lot of factors and variables, like what is your overhead, what are your expenses, like all these things. Um, you may have to become a little more mechanized with the way that you process your herbs and like if you sell dried herbs or fresh herbs. Um, the way you harvest them, like you would definitely have to find things to become more efficient, which we're still working on. Something to mention is that we sell most of our herbs fresh, not dry. So I'd say like 75%, 80% are sold fresh. So we ship our fresh herbs, or they're locally delivered. And then kind of what we don't sell fresh, then we dry, and we offer that in our apothecary online. But most of what we're working with is fresh herbs, because there is less work in that than the drying. Now, these big farms, there's some, Zach Wood's Herb Farm is a good one. Um, Foster Farm Botanicals, like they're bigger. So you can look at some of the stuff they're doing, and they do have like this big equipment that you run it through, and it processes them, it dries them, like it's incredible. But you're talking about that, like tens of thousands of dollars in equipment. But if you have the startup capability for that, then I totally think, because there are farms that are doing it.
Do you envision a day in the future where you could have how you have your kind of local farms where you're feeding the community around you, that you also have your um, local medicinal herb farms that are growing medicine for the people around you? That becomes kind of almost as ubiquitous as like a local vegetable farmer.
I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah, but
Like I would.
you, you would need 10 vegetable farmers, maybe only one.
Mhm.
Because a
You're
little
saying, like,
medicine,
so it can't be like saturated market
you
the way
can't have,
that.
the vegetables, you have a lot more possibilities, a lot more doors. I think, I think it's, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think it's totally feasible if the scenario is what she talks about. But I think there's so many variables. It's still going to be easier to make money on vegetables. I'm pretty sure about that. It's just there's no, don't you think?
I think like what you're mentioning though, like this possibility of like you've got your food farmers and then you've also got like your medicine farm. They're kind of in the middle of where somebody's like, okay, I'm gonna go buy my, my eggs and my chicken, like my meat farmer and my vegetables. And now, oh, my family, like we need to restock our home apothecary. So I'm gonna go see my herb farmer. And I
Mm.
think like that idea that each community had that would be like incredible.
That's happening, I feel like.
Like I think, yeah, and I think that will continue to grow as more and more people kind of opt out of, the medical system. And so that they want to take that into their hands for their own family and themselves. And I think that would be like an ideal, that would be amazing.
But I think if you talk about the business aspect of it, um, a little on these medicinal herbs goes a long way, uh, and so if you really want to try to create a farm, and this is your livelihood, I think an herb farm may be a very good second job. Like we have this piece of land and we want to concentrate. Obviously, it depends. There's so many variables, but I'm imagining something like what we have, and then you can rotate your vegetables, and then you have. I mean, you can make medicine. That'd be a great job. You actually take your crop and you make your medicine.
I've seen more and more people doing that where they're growing their herbs and making their teas and tinctures from the herbs.
Then I think you can.
And I think that's pretty cool too to see like that full circle. Because there are plenty of people that are like, whoa, I don't know what to do with this. This is too intimidating for me. Like, I just want you to make it and I'm going to buy it from you, which is fine. So
that was actually my next question was, would it be better to primarily focus on just growing the raw product or to begin to value add the herbs that you're growing and let that sort of be the main kind of revenue generator?
Mm-hmm. We've gone like back and forth about that over the last couple of years of like continuing to grow the herbs, but also making like herbal tinctures and teas and things. And for us personally, it wasn't something we felt like we could take on at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But is it in the future? Like maybe.
It's a whole different thing, but yeah.
But then I think what then like my brain goes to is like, well, we're certified organic. So then our tinctures, we have to get certified. And then there's like a whole, like the labeling and there's just a whole other, like you got to have a certified kitchen and all these different things that would be a whole undertaking in itself. But I think that's a beautiful business model that you, I just bought like a tincture that I needed from a herb farm in North New York, upstate New York. And they grew or they foraged this with black walnut and our black walnuts are done, but they had foraged their black walnut hulls and made a tincture. And so everything came from their property. And so like, I think that's amazing because it's so closed loop. And if you can have that in your community so that medicine came from your region, even better.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is something about, people talk about like the food that we grow, like each food grown locally for obvious reasons, but also because it's grown in your climate and in your, your region. And there's a resonance in your body with food that is grown in your temperature and your climate. Well, the medicine, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really cool if that's still coming from.
No, and I think, kind of getting back to that original question, like, could you do this if, you were an herb farmer and you wanted to go to the farmer's market? But yeah, I think
sorry, I interrupted you. You could go to the farmer's market with your herbs if you made tinctures from it.
Yeah, if you had value-added products.
Right, and this is purely like my opinion and speculation. Like I don't know, but just our experience, like that. I think yes, that you could do.
But let's say that you have money and that you want to invest it into an herb farm, and you follow some of the advice that she gave, where you really study the whole business, and you have the money to buy the equipment, to dry it, to ship it, and you contact us out. I mean, you can dream it; it's possible. We import more herbs than we use. I mean, but even like we there's the growing demand and the difference between what we produce and what gets brought in. I mean, it's not even funny. We've seen the pictures. It's the qualities, the medicine. It's so much.
So like your
product,
right? So like I have some comparison pictures on my Instagram that a customer of mine actually she created it. And so like it's like our calendula and our chamomile side by side with some from bulk producers. And I mean the dry, like I very much feel, now this is a dried herb, but I very much feel like our dried herbs are still very much alive
Mhm.
The color is still really vibrant. They're still like because they're low temp dried. They're dried in a very controlled condition, and so that keeps the color. You're slowly drying them over a long period of time, so um, it's really different. Where the other ones were kind of lifeless and had no color and were brown and things like that. And so the average time that a lot of these imported bulk herbs that come in and are sold by these big distributors, the time that they're on the shelf or the age, by the time you get them, could be 5 or 6 or 7 years old. And so when you think about that, and then you want to make tea or like, your apothecary medicine from that, like that's concerning. And the other aspect of that too is that if a lot of these herbs are being produced outside of our country, like what are those farmers being paid? Are they being paid a
Mhm.
living wage? What are their working conditions? Um, what are the standards for them to be imported here? So there's a lot of the miles that it travels, like all these things. So there's a lot of like concerns overall with that industry that I think like he said, a lot of people are thinking about like local slow food or even like, their clothing and how that can impact the environment. But are we thinking about these herbs as more and more people move towards choosing that for their families and themselves?
I mean, we could demand people. We could sell more of certain things if we had. We get calls
For herbs?
for herbs. Yeah, we get calls. So you have all the kombucha makers. You have so many people using fresh herbs in their. I mean, in their alcoholic drinks.
Yeah, you have distilleries. People
Yeah.
are doing it for gin and different things like that.
So there's a lot of
We sold
opportunity.
a lot of Tulsi to a gin maker locally in Atlanta last year. So,
Yeah. So the business, the industry of this is growing because the field, actually the different kinds of medicinal herbs that they are. There's a lot of,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
they used. I mean, Red Bull's got one with flavored. What was it? Elderberry or something. It's like really. I mean, it was all flavored with chemicals, but
Yeah.
the thing elderberry. I mean, the demand for elderberry is going growing really quickly.
Oh, I mean, you can go to the grocery store and they have a children's cough syrup with like organic honey and elderberry now. And so it's becoming much more ubiquitous. But what I was gonna say from my experience, not really going the medicinal herb route, but growing a lot of those sort of similar things has been, that I mean, yes, these make very strong, powerful medicines, but like you've mentioned several times, like they do have culinary uses. They do have kind of other culinary adjacent things like selling to kombucha makers, distilleries, bartenders, those sort of things. I have another friend growing on the other side of Atlanta who he does a lot of things for bartenders and things like that, or selling some of these really strong medicinal herbs like the flowers or the baby leaves as garnishes for high end restaurants. I sold hundreds of dollars worth of anise hyssop flower to a high end restaurant in Atlanta last year. Calendula flowers edible. So many of these things also have additional uses. It's not food or medicine, but they have so many different uses and so many different kind of market streams that you can go down with that you really could sort of diversify in the same way we do with vegetables, like where you have like you're selling fresh to local customers at a market, you have stuff to chefs, you have big wholesale orders to people who are going to process it and make something out of it. There's a lot of different options with these herbs and these plants.
Mhm. And I think the cool thing too is like we sell so much fresh, like I mentioned, but then what we don't sell fresh, we dry. So nothing's really going to waste. So I
Mhm.
think that's another part of it where we are trying to like produce and use everything that grows. So
Cool.
It's been fun. I've enjoyed it. Having grown radishes and tomatoes. I'm gonna try to grow medicinal herbs and tomatoes again.
Well, that was going to be my question. If you're at a two roads diverging and you had to pick vegetables or herbs,
Yeah,
which
I don't think we're totally. It'd have to be a very slow transition.
the pick though.
if you had to pick,
My transition just for my own interests in it and all of it, I would choose medicinal herbs.
Yeah, I would too.
'Cause
Like,
I've done everything so long, but business wise, logical wise, obviously, it'd have to be a slow progression. So,
yeah,
we talk about, so if we dream about the future a lot or we talk about this, that's where we say, can we just grow like vegetables for us and just be an herb farm? Like if that could be our dream, like, and then at that point, yeah, could we make our own tinctures and move into something, would that be Nicholas's retirement?
So yeah, I mean, it would have to be.
You're always from the business perspective. I think that's something important to mention, a little side note, but farming is a business. So
Mhm.
you have Nicholas has a business degree, and I think that's helped him to do it for 32 years and be successful, because the average span of a small farm is 5 years and they fold or something. So it's, the fact that you can you have to still treat it like a business and like any other business. And we're always looking for ways to go, okay, this is still a business, and how does it become more efficient? And even, you manage employees, you have all these aspects of it. At the end of the day, it's still a business. It is all these other things, but it's still a business that has to work as a business.
And if people wanted to either learn more about the farm or take your or participate in the workshop that you have, or maybe do any sort of consulting from you guys, or just buy the herbs, what's the best way for people to sort of kind of get in touch or participate in everything that you guys have?
To sign up for our email list, because I let everybody know what's going on there. We have the farm apothecary online, so we ship our dried herbs around the country. You can shop there. We have our farm store to shop online, which is just for local pickup. If you're interested in fresh herbs, we currently work on a pre-order system for the year. And because we're a small farm, we only have a limited space. So there's a wait list for pre-ordering our fresh herbs. But if you email me, I can put you on the wait list, and people drop off. So, sometimes it works out. The class I did is online, and we do classes on the farm. Once the weather's nicer, like to do herb classes where we go out and they harvest calendula and make, a skin oil or a tincture or something with it. And I teach you, kind of walk you through the whole process. Or we make a sage honey or different things. We do private classes or private tours if people are interested. And we do consulting. So yeah, Nicholas will come out and, look at your space, or you could come here and talk to us if you're interested in doing, starting up vegetable or herb or both, anything like that. Anything else?
No. I mean, we're online.
No,
Yeah.
I'm online.
Yeah.
It's not online.
Yeah. Good job. I'm glad we got you an email address.
Yeah, good thing you have an email.
No, I mean, I think I am really excited about the medicinal herbs now. I believe in it. I take them. I mean, it's all,
Mhm.
everybody's going to eat broccoli. It's everybody going to take.
Everyone's not going to eat broccoli, Nicholas. I hate to break it to you, but not everybody will. It's still a big deal too.
Okay, well, most people eat broccolini,
Yeah.
or so you know what I mean. So it's a bit more adventurous, I guess, as learning, but it's what we believe in. I mean, that's what we do. So it's not it's a no brainer to kind of continue that. But it's still going to be easier. Currently, I think if you are a new farmer like yourself, or that's listening to this podcast because you're interested in doing it or want to becoming a farmer, it's still going to be easier to raise some vegetables and go to market kind of what you're doing. But take the knowledge that's out there from us or from books and whatnot, and incorporate a little bit of it and see where it goes. That would be my advice. And like you say, go work somewhere. You're going to need help soon, volunteers and everybody, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
It's super important. People will contact us about consulting. And I always say, come volunteer with us first and make sure
Mhm.
you want to do this. If it's somebody who's I've got this raw piece of land and, I'm retiring, or I want, and they have no experience at all and really don't understand what it takes in Georgia in the summer, in
Mhm.
August. That's when I want you to come volunteer and see if you still want to start a farm. And I say that as a joke, but not really, because I
Mhm.
always say, don't pay us for consulting first. If you haven't volunteered on a farm, worked on a farm, we'll take volunteers. You'll take volunteers. Come see if you really, really want what this takes, and that how you feel. And then you may love it, or you may see, oh, I need to do something, this, but not this. And it's a great way to, that's the most important thing.
I think the biggest thing is it's how much work it is, how much actual work, great physical and also mental, and how much of all this is out of your control at the end of the day. And I know that people are always ready for this without really, really learning it. She's saying that the average small farm only lasts 5 years. And I think money is one thing, but then it's how little money you can use. you can, or you get plenty, but it's not, it's a lifestyle more than anything else. You're not going to have a corporate job and make, $70,000 your first year. I mean, you're just not, you know, you just have to grow into it. And so, I think when people realize that the lifestyle is not exactly what they're looking for, they bow out. Or I loved it. You love it. You raise a family in it. I mean, it's the story you told me yesterday about your son. I mean, I thought it was classic.
Yeah.
I'll do her later.
Yeah. It's probably not fitting for the podcast.
It was
But,
really cute, though. Yeah.
But
I
it's,
mean,
I think like I heard somebody say I'm rich in other ways. And so like she
Mhm.
was saying she was rich in the fact that she gets to be home with her kids every day and that she gets to work from home and gets to see, her 2-year-old grow up, and rich in the sense that I get to go outside and pick my vegetables for dinner, and rich in the sense that I can go dig up my echinacea plant and make a tincture if, we're
Mhm.
sick or something. So I think this is a whole other take, but how do you define rich and wealthy? And
Mhm.
is it just money or is it all these other things? So
well, in our society, unfortunately, mostly money. But I think that's the realization that I think you understand. I've been going through it and going through it again with a baby here. It's magical, and so it's worth a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. I know I'm pulling you away from work at the farm. I'm pulling myself away from work at the farm. So thank you for giving up a little bit of your valuable time to do that with me. And it would be commendable and celebratory in and of itself to be able to talk and say like you're making it happen, a successful business after 30 years. But then to also add on to that you've been able to replicate yourself, inspire and help other farms. Several of us who are still in the area who are going on and doing our own thing. But then on top of that, to be also say for the last 7 years, you guys have been able to pivot and continue to innovate and change your business in a way that you can, remain kind of on the cutting edge and into this new industry of growing herbs and herbalism. So there's a lot to thank you guys for, both personally and then also just for kind of agriculture in the Southeast and around the country. So thank you guys so much for everything that you guys have done.
it's humble here is not.
Yeah, I mean Nicolas will never toot his own horn, but I do it for him all the time. So yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Now get back to work. All right. Man, that was a really fun interview to get to do. I always love getting a chance to talk with Nicolas and Jeni. And even though I see them multiple times every week, it was just nice to be able to let everyone get a peek of what our regular conversations look like when we're across the bed from one another, transplanting some beets or weeding the lettuce or whatever it may be. So I hope that you guys have seen them as the wealth of knowledge that I have known that they are for all these years. So please go support what they're doing. Pick up some of the herbs that they have on the online store, and you can do the masterclass for growing medicinal herbs. And if you really wanted to, you can reach out to Nicolas and Jeni for a consultation, and you can learn more about them at their website. So please, please, please go check them out and support what they're doing. And like we say every time, huge thank you to Diego and the whole team over at Modern Grower for making the show possible with all the tools and the tips and the gear that you guys provide. It has made me a better grower, and I know that it will help you guys as well. And with that, not only have the tools been a big help, but also the content, the podcast, and the YouTube videos, and all of the things over the years that have inspired me to become a better grower. Please go check those things out, and so they can help you as well. You can go over to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can check out all the different episodes. Look for Modern Grower on your app of choice. And as always, this podcast is value for value. We want to strive every single week to ensure that this content can go out to you free of charge, which means that we are asking you that you can kick some of that value back our way. So if you find this valuable, if you're learning, if you're growing, if you're feeling inspired from the Rookie Farmer podcast, please consider kicking that back our way with a little bit of a monetary gift to us. So you can do $1, you can do $5, you can do $50, whatever it may be, no matter how frequent or infrequent you do, every little bit helps. We can upgrade equipment, provide us more time. We can help get other people onto the show. There's a lot of things that we can do with your support. So please go over to Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo. You can look up at Crop Culture Farm, our farm, and just kick us a few bucks so that we can keep this train rolling. Thank you so much. Once again, you have been listening to the Rookie Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Alec, and until next time, peace.